kia orana, malolele, tolofa, bula, and hello from New Zealand, the Pacific, and to wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another edition of my Straight Up Show, where I interview leaders in the health and sports professions. We get into the minds and souls of those people, and we find out what makes them tick. And if you can get one gem or one little bit of advice or information from any of our talks, then it's been a massive success. And I'm sure that you'll get plenty of gems from my guest today, my old mate, Slade McFarland. Slade, thank you so much, mate. Welcome to the Straight Up Show.
It's pretty amazing, this platform, so it's really good, Jeff, to do something like this. And any way that we can help our men and women out there. Especially in the
Cheers, brother. No, really appreciate it. And the key with this is, the vision for me is to grow this and more people watching. We've had some good views on previous episodes so far, and I'll try and promote this far and wide and get your message across there. So what I want to do to start with, though, Bud, is to introduce you, and because I want people to get an idea of the person that you are, the man that you are. Not just the rugby player on the field, but the coach that you've been off the field as well, and the man you are, and of course your work around, and again, I want to touch on men in construction as well. So, Slade, I played with a guy called Dwayne Monkley years ago, and he was touted as probably one of the most unluckiest men in New Zealand rugby to never wear the black jersey. Well, mate, I reckon you are right up there. I mean, your record as it speaks. Let's see here. 128 games for North Harbour. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
128 games for North Harbour. 52 Super Rugby games. You played 6 for the Chiefs. You had 13 for the Mighty Crusaders and 33 for the Blues. That's an amazing achievement in itself. New Zealand Maori, 25 games. You throw in there the New Zealand 15 and New Zealand A, New Zealand Development, and over 200 club games for the mighty East Coast Bays. What an amazing career, Slade. Do you look back on that with some satisfaction now that you're obviously you've been out of it for a while, but do you look back with some pride and some satisfaction, or is there still some regrets?
Oh, I think the thing was that, the game in itself gave me great opportunities, but also it gave me life skills that, I didn't really think that, after rugby that would be quite highlighted and quite important. When people say that, you've had that longevity in the game, I think it's just because I just loved the game that much and I gave everything I could possibly give to it. But, we'd love to play till we die. But the reality is the body just can't hold or sustain that kind of absolute punishment that we went through. And now I look at it. I can say that most people I've had moments where I said I should have done it, but the what ifs. But the reality is that I did the best I can at that time, and I gave my soul to the game. And now it's just looking forward to seeing what other opportunities are, and that's mostly being married and looking after my kids. And those are all new goals that had to remind myself there's life after rugby.
Absolutely, and on that too, congratulations on your wedding last weekend, mate. That's fantastic. Welcome to the husbandhood, I should say. So good job on there. And I want viewers to understand too that you were in an era where we had some legends in there. So you were, if we looked at you being an All Black, obviously you had Sean Fitzpatrick in front of you. You had Norm Hewitt. Later on, there was Anton Oliver. So you look at those guys, and they're well-established hookers as well. So for you to be knocking on that door, that was a huge achievement for you. Was there a moment there where you felt a bit, what's the word, I guess, sort of despondent, I guess? Did you feel as though that All Black jersey was getting further and further out of your grasp, or was there never, ever a moment you kept pushing hard, you kept focusing, and just in the hope that the selectors would see some sense?
I think the thing was you're always working as hard as you can to try and get into that realm. And it really, at the end of the day, I had to come to terms with it. It comes down to three men's opinion at the end of the day, and that's what you're working against all the time. If you're the flavour of the month, then hey, all good to go. But it just seems like as I was going through, obviously there's some great players ahead of me. As much as I worked as hard and being part of the second tier of guys that were available, I always knew I was there, but it was just when that door opened. But I think like I got closer to the time when I hit late 20s that obviously that dream is not going to happen. So I had to really not just put up with it, but I think the thing was that obviously it wasn't going to be my time like the Dwayne Monkleys of the world. We all had opportunities, but just never were given to us. And I just I had to be grateful that I had the opportunity to play in other black jerseys that meant just as much as mostly playing for the top tier.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I want to touch on life after rugby, etc., as well. But the other, what I want to do is maybe go back a bit and just get into how you got into rugby, why rugby, and who were some early influences on your career as well. Because I know that the first time I met you was at a North Harbour training. I think Brad Murant might have been coaching Harbour, and you were this young 20-year-old bloody staunch hooker, tough as bloody guts, and you turned up and I thought, whoa, who's this bloke? So who was some of the early mentors? I mean, maybe at first 15, what school did you go to? So can you give us a bit of a rundown as to how you entered professional rugby and where did it start?
I heard back to Auckland, so I was playing school rugby for Dulwich College. I remember getting called up by a mate. He said, "Hey, look, why don't you come down and play for Marist?" I was only 16 at the time. It was an under 19 grade. I think that's where my actual career started because playing in that competition under 19s, only 16. I was getting beaten up by the likes of the Otahu's, to Papas, all these kind of teams, and I think I was mentally tough by the time I actually came out of Dulwich and went to Rangitoto College. So to be injected into that kind of environment. So I had a lot of, superstars in the time when I was at Marist, the likes of the John Kilrins, the Bernie McCartles, Terry Wright, the Brook brothers, all these guys that I was looking up to. And, I think 1989 is when they actually won the Gallagher Shield. So all those kind of little things really stuck in my mind. And when I came to the North Shore, well, not being rude, but, not many darkies on this side. So, the actual game itself, as physical as it was in Auckland, when I came to the North Shores, it was relatively easy. So, not to say that there's great caliber of players on the North Shore. I remember my first game for Bays, and I was playing against Ron Williams. So he was a current All Black at the time. But I think my childhood hero is actually Buck Shelford, and I think one of the biggest accolades I could mostly take away from it is that here's a guy who's just had a test and he's turning up for his club side, and I'm on the same field with him. I wasn't too sure at the time whether to tackle him or to give him a hug. It's like so all these kind of things were happening during that time. And I think a lot of influence I had was mostly with Mark Anscombe, a stalwart of mostly East Coast Bays, and being part of his family, and just really understanding the game itself, because it wasn't easy back then. For an 18-year-old to sit in mostly premier grade of that caliber, man, it was actually frightening, because the days of rucking were still amongst that, and the game had changed so much from the early 90s that when I arrived, and then the game slowly cleaned itself up. So to be part of a kind of fraternity that was like, you actually had to die, or your legs had to be broken to be pulled off the field. Whereas, look at the game now, you got the substitutions, and it's all about trying to give you the best opportunity for the game. But whereas back in those days, no one gave you a chance. If you got a chance, man, you had to hold on to it with your dear life.
Absolutely. And without wanting to sort of sound like one of those guys, who back in our day, but it was so different, wasn't it? And, you look at yourself and your career as well. There were no substitutes. So it wasn't as if you could sub you're good. Yeah. So it wasn't as if you could just sub your on and off as well. So you look at someone like Norm Hewitt sitting on his ass for how many tests behind Sean Fitzpatrick. And when you entered North Harbour, you had an All Black hooker in front of you and Graham Dow. So Dowdy was there as well. So it is a bit tougher. Well, when I say tougher, it was way tougher back in the day. And as you mentioned there as well, a couple of key things you hit on there was mental toughness and, things like the rucking, etc. And we didn't really, you get a bit of a head knock. It'd be like, oh, what's your name? Oh, my name's Slade. Oh, we'll get back out there, And nowadays we're really concerned around that, which is really, really good. So here's a question that I'm going to jump forward a bit. As a coach, then, how do you instruct your younger players around? And I love using the word mongrel and toughness, etc. How do you coach that into younger players nowadays? What's the secret there? Because if we look at your coaching career, obviously you're what we term the scrum doctor, I guess. You've been part of Harbour ITM Cup. You've been coaching numerous teams as well. So how do you do that with the younger ones coming through? What's the advice there around mental toughness?
I think the thing is that, you got to keep an open mind. You're always learning. In this game in itself, you think that once you think you know it all, that's your downfall. But it's just been having the ability to be open to other kind of like information that's there. What I always try and look for the guys is that the drive has to come within itself. You don't have to be mongrel. It's just that you just play hard, and that you take every step that you can to make sure that you're always striving to go forward. Because the thing is with this game, it can you run a fine line, because the mere fact is that you're always one injury away from being retired. And that's the thing about this game is that you just have to be mentally kind of strong. Where you're going to some days you're going to be successful, but some days you're not going to be that successful, and then you got to take that on board and learn from it. So I always ask for our front rowers, take a notebook, look at who the guys that are pretty tough that you come up, and actually get yourself psyched up, ready to go. Because even though a scrum can only be about 30 seconds, but that could be the beginning or ending of your career if your scrum's going backwards at great knots. So it's about getting guys switched into every facet of their game, and learning that you have to bring the best of yourself there at that one point in time. Because you can't really relax at any time, because there's someone always prepared to actually step right in front of you.
That's exactly it. And because this is my platform, Slade, as we can be as politically incorrect as we want to, and we can say whatever we want as well without any fear of repercussions. So I'm going to lead into a guy that we both know really well as Steve Jackson and Jacko. And when we talk about mental toughness and we talk about physical presence, etc., he was a coach that struck me as just being real to the core, real grassroots type of tough coach. So one of his things he'd say is, when you enter a ruck, you got to treat a ruck like a pub fight, and that struck me. And he said, rugby is not a contact sport. Dancing is a contact sport. Rugby is a violent sport. So when I listen to that, to me, that makes me go, yeah, absolutely. Again, do you think that's really, I mean, you and I agree, but people listening to this might get a little bit offended, do you think? Is that part of the culture that we're bringing up today, do you think, is around, because I said we want rugby to be that physical, aggressive game that we were brought up with. To me, it seems as though it's being, I wouldn't say dumbed down, but certainly we're trying to get away from that contact, which is great. I mean, head contact, etc. But how do you keep that physical element of rugby, but being at the same time within the laws of the game? The question I'm asking, I guess, getting around to, is that it comes back to that mental toughness. How do we coach mental toughness? How do you get that physical mongrel that I like to use? How do you get that into the young players nowadays?
You actually have to give them examples of what that looks like from where you've come from. You've got to show your failures as well to the players, because at the end of the day, we're only human. And if you can't give them an element of where you've come from and how you've actually had to get there, there are times that you have to hide it very close to heart, because it has hurt. But just realizing how to actually turn it around and say, sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and say, man, there's nothing more I can do about this, but I could try and give it the best shot the next time around. So it's learning every day. I always say to our team, who we're, every day's a school day. And then, if you don't take that on board, then how are we supposed to develop and learn and understand what the toughness that we have to bring to the game? Because, at the end of the day, it is a physical game. It is something that we have to stand up and be accounted for. It's either that or go backwards. You choose. So the choices are laid in front of us. And yeah, we always want to be one up on somebody because that's, it's about dominance, and that's about the game. What it's all about is being dominant as much as you can. Not going to win every fight, but when the ones that you do take, you hold on to them as much as you can, and remember them too, because it's going to come up again at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you hit it on the head. There's that fine line, isn't there? Because what we don't want to be seen as being this staunch, alpha male where you take a concrete pull, harden up, etc. Because we're going to move into now a little bit of an element that's I wouldn't say a passion of mine, but it's something that I'm really concerned about, which is the mental health of these players nowadays. Not just rugby players, but I think top level sports people, the pressure on them. And we all think it's a glamorous lifestyle. You're touring around the world, etc. But 9 times out of 10, all you're seeing is a rugby field, and then you're seeing the hotel dining room and your bed in the hotel room, and that's it. And it's a tough life. You're traveling, you're away from family and friends, etc. So did you have any coping mechanisms, like when you were touring or you're playing or you're away from your family? How do you create that line? Like when you cross the sideline, you have to be Slade McFarland, Maori All Black, or Slade McFarland, North Harbour rep. But you also have to be an empathetic person as well. Otherwise, you can go that other way, can't you? You've really got to, show some compassion and empathy, etc. So that fine line. How did you cope? What are some coping mechanisms that you can share with us?
I think the thing is, the challenge is like we always say to our rugby players, you're only as good as your last game. So you had to really pick yourself up to understand. But it's hard because if you weren't doing so well the week beforehand, it's in the back of your mind that you really have to keep on stepping up every time. And it's just that mental ability to realize there's always someone that's always prepared to take your spot. If the coach is not happy, so you're really running that gauntlet the whole time just to keep yourself mentally sane. But also it's the balance between home life and your playing life. And then when you're getting on that field, you're actually representing not just yourself, but every part of you, being Maori, being Samoan, or your families, where you're, and plus when you're, as rugby players, we are entertainers. And and at the end of the day, we're entertaining the people that are out there that have given up their time to watch us, and we just got to provide the best kind of entertainment. But that's what that rugby does to us. It's actually, you're on show, and we're always trying to strive for that next tier. So best way I could say was that I carried my family and all the people that supported me, and gave me this opportunity. That's mostly what kept me above board. But like you said, you run a fine line because the mental health side of things is that if you tip too far one way, you can look like you're just having a real bad day on the game, and that can even throw you out as well. Look going forward, or even the mere fact that the coach says, "Look, I can't play you next week," because of X, Y, and Z, and they can be a real downer. So you're always in the spotlight, no matter what that looks like. And thank God, back in those days we didn't really have social media, so and the added pressure of what that looks like. So I've got to be mindful that the age of the game itself and what I was in, I'm very grateful to be there. But the age of where they are now, oh man, it's a different ball game altogether.
Yeah. That is tough, and you hit it on the head. That social media is just it can be cruel at times, can't it? So, how did what environments were you in when, as a player, did you feel were really exceptional around helping you on and off the field? Was it the Crusaders environment? Were they a step ahead of everybody else? Was it the North Harbour environment? Was there any help at all back when you were playing around trying to prepare you for life after rugby?
No, I don't think there was. I was very grateful that I was always the youngest one, and then I ended up being the oldest one. Like the likes of the Rushies and the Frank Bunces, Richard Turners. When I was coming through, I had a lot of older guys, like Graham Dowd and the big cog, So the things were that without those kind of older guys, they really kind of helped me go through. But as I was doing that, I was picking up information, how to be the best person I could be. One is that I was always seen but not heard because I was just trying to take in what was going on around me, and I think the thing is that as I got older, I realised then all of a sudden these guys were looking at me for information. So it actually reciprocated back to most people really having to give back to the game the way that it gave back to me, because I didn't really have a good clue what I was in for. I played the game because I bloody enjoyed it, but yeah.
Around because we've touched on obviously the mental toughness side of it, and then life after rugby, things like that. So I want to move into and ask you a question around mates in construction. That's something that I wanted to ask you about, and what that involved, because I mean you're not there with them at the moment, but what that involved, how you got into it, and what's your sort of passion around health and wellness and suicide prevention, etc., and counselling. So maybe if you could just explain to some of our listeners there around how you got into that and what Mates in Construction is all about.
Yeah, I think after I looked at mostly doing a lot of youth work, youth guarantee work, helping kids, that are mostly falling off the rails and trying to give them other opportunities through sport, or mostly just through understanding how to do a program with weightlifting, all kind of things. So I had a whole lot of mostly knowledge from the rugby fraternity, which I could bring to the forefront and teach. Now, to get that opportunity was that I think at the time, no doubt I was going through my own mental stresses. I think more than anything, because of the game, I had finished up with the game, and now it's like, what am I supposed to do? And then, so I was very lucky that I think this guy called Dave Norris from AUT back in 1991, who actually, I think he passed me because I think he might have felt sorry for me at the time. When I was doing a diploma in recreation management. I passed, but I did not even know what I passed, So I looked at this piece of paper, didn't think of it, played my rugby career. All of a sudden they come back and then they said, "Oh, do you have any qualifications?" I said, "I've got this piece of paper. I'm not too sure what it'll do." And he said, "Oh, you got the job." And I was like, oh, okay. So that in itself, so there's a lot of blessings from other people that I didn't realize would actually help me out in the long run. But I think with the Mates in Construction, I actually went away from the youth guarantee work, and then I started doing health and safety. So I knew that it was a massive field. I was doing, asbestos removal, so understanding about asbestos and how bad it is to your health, etc. And a good mate of mine rang me up and said, "Mate, I think you need to apply for this job." And so Mates came up 3 years ago, and I applied, and all of a sudden I was in Mates in Construction. Now, I didn't know what we're in for. I had to learn a hell of a lot about what that looked like, but we're providing programs where we're trying to encourage our men to actually speak up. Now, it's really hard as being a male, and especially from a rugby fraternity, speaking up is the last thing you do, and so it was really challenging for me because actually, here I am learning about what we should be doing, and then passing that knowledge on to our men and say, this is what you should be doing, when I needed to be following it myself. And that's one of the mostly the hardest things that I had to learn in the 3 years that I was there, that how can I possibly tell people that, you should be open and talk about your feelings and talk to, someone that you trust, when I didn't do it myself. So I had to take a hell of a lot on board. And so, I did an assist course, so it's applied suicide intervention skills training. And it really opened that door, because I have entertained suicide myself when I was in my late 30s. Because the mere fact is that, you've got a young family, and what was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to provide for them? And all of a sudden, going from, an abundance of money to now all of a sudden zero, or you're back into the real world. You're joining the 5 to 5 club. You're waking up at 5 in the morning, going home at 5, or maybe even 7. Doing these long hours, and it was a challenge in itself, and I learned a hell of a lot about mates and what it did for me, and I learned that at the end of the day I had to be authentic. That's the only way I could be. I had to be expose myself to the people that are out there, because let's not bullshit a bullshitter, because at the end of the day they'll see right through you. If you're just there doing a tick box exercise, they know you're not genuine. So I had to learn to be genuine and learn to know that when we deal with our dark times that we have, it's not great, and as men, and when we look at it in the way that we, like our forefathers went to war. Did they ever talk about war? Of course they didn't. So, and then as our children, although who grew up around that, monkey see, monkey do. If dad ain't going to say anything, you're not going to say anything. So we think that's normal. Where I was trying to change that, to get our men to actually realize that, I don't blame our forefathers, because that's what they knew. But we want to change that, because there's too many men taking their lives. And because there's a certain amount of stigma about, one, asking for help. Two, that I'm going to look like a pussy if I ask for help. Three, am I still a man if I'm going to ask for help? So all these things that, we as men challenge ourselves with the mere fact that, and sometimes, we have to challenge ourselves to actually get to the point where we can say to ourselves, man, I actually do need help. And I did. I found that out when I got a little bit further on in my life. And then, because I actually played rugby as part of my therapy. So anybody pissed me off during the week, well, it was almost like that water boy syndrome,
Yeah.
You just put the face of that person that's pissed you off, and you go and kill him.
Yeah.
I played hard, and that's the reason why I played till I was 48, because that was my therapy, and it was my way of trying to deal with, the stuff that I had to deal with, and until a mate told me to stop. But prior to that, I had to have counselling pretty much every week. I had counselling every month for about 10 years. So without that kind of support and help, I call her my incinerator, actually, to be fair, and I still got it. Because I could dump my rubbish, and she was able to burn it, and I just laid it all out so that I could be clear in mind. So to be married was the product of going through mates, and I put my hand on heart. That's the reason why I got married. If we got time, I'll tell you the story really quickly. When I was out there doing the program, I used to say to the guys, when you go home, just spend 15 minutes with your wife and just let her talk. And I said, as men, we have this skill. It's a great skill. We're good problem solvers. But so when you're specialized in your job, someone will come up to you and say, "Hey, if I do this or do that, what do we do?" And you say, you'll give them the advice that they need. You help that problem, solve it. But that same skill in itself is no good when you take it home. When your wife speaks to you, and you got that 15 minutes, I guarantee you would have started a fight by then, because you would have tried to solve her problem. You would have said, if it was Y and Z, you wouldn't have come up with A, B, and C. So I asked the guy to say, just try that and go home. Well, he went home. I saw him mostly about a couple of weeks later, and he came up and he goes, "Bro, it works. It works." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Yeah, I went home." I said, "Mumsy, just tell me how your day is." And she kept on talking, and I think 15 minutes went by. And the actual wife turned around and said, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Oh, he goes, well, generally, by the time I'm saying what I'm saying, you're trying to fix my problems." And that's the reason why, for a lot of our men, that's the reason why our wives want to step forward and slap you in the head, because we're not very good listeners. And so, and ever since he's come back and talked to me, because the wife actually turned around and said, "Oh, what Dr. Phil have you been bloody talking to?" But he dedicates 15 or 20 minutes a day just to talk to his wife. And then I realized, boom, it all clicked. That's what it means to be a team. But you need your partner, because that's part of the team. You got to show everything that you have, so that you can both walk that same walk together. And I said, on the day that I walked away, I said, I'm very lucky that I've been through, mate, because it's changed me, who I am. I'm a better man for it. And I went back home to my wife, my girl partner at the time, and because everybody goes, how did you propose? And I said, and this is my kids. And I said, well, I was lying in bed and the kids went, no, that's enough. That's enough. I said, I lay there and I just said, would you marry me? And she goes, yeah. And then I just rolled over and went back to sleep. Never thought anything, what the hell's going on here? But it was just the mere fact that I just, I realized that, those little moments, like I always said, it's like sitting on top of tabletop mountain in South Africa. Yeah, I did it with all the guys, but there wasn't the person I loved right beside me. And I can say, hey, look at this view. Isn't it amazing? But now I realize now from moving forward is that I'm trying to create best memories that I can, So and now that I have my wife, that I know that I can do these things and be proud of those things. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the reason why Mates was a very phenomenal for the amount of lessons that I've learned to be a better person, but also having to be genuine, vulnerable. It's one of the biggest ones for us men, being vulnerable, and that it's okay to not be okay, but to actually have those discussions. So that's where it all came about, and to where I am today.
That's a fantastic story, mate, and such great advice too. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'll ask my mate Kevin to maybe just cut that story out, and we can use it as a little bit of a tidbit when we send it out onto our social media channels, because it really does hit home. Because we've touched on today already around mental toughness and the mongrel and all those attributes required to play a physical game such as rugby. And here in New Zealand, rugby is just all-consuming. It's our national game. So then there's that, how do we get these rugby guys to, as you said, you had a couple of key words there, vulnerability. How do we show vulnerability? How do we just open up and say, hey, it's not okay, man, I need some help? Because it's still happening today. We look at a Sean Wainui, we look at a Mikey T. It's still happening, and we can't, it just seems to be an epidemic. And, someone like Mike King is just crying out for help. How do we, my show here today, what we're going to do and what we're going to share is 0.001% of what we can do. How, because I took the North Harbour under-19s team down to Taupo for the National Under-19 tournament, and down there they had half a day of experts and counselling, etc., around life after rugby, preparing for life after rugby and counselling, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. But that's provincial under-19 stuff. It needs to be across the board, not just at rugby, but every sport, but not just sport, just in life in general. How do we get our young men in particular to actually open up? How do we ditch that harden up, take a concrete pull attitude? What's the advice that you would give to someone right now who's watching this and thinking, I'm contemplating suicide?
Well, the thing is that there's so many avenues for somebody to actually have they get the help. They've just got to choose to take it. It's one of the hardest things for us as males, especially in this game, is that the stigma around actually getting help. You're not supposed to, So the only way that we can do this is like the platform that you have, Jeff, and just having people like myself just sitting here and say, bro, my life wasn't all that great, but I had to make the best of a bad situation. And when these, like we always say, what we do is we're trying to encourage our men to realize that, we're trying to string as many sunrises as possible so that, that it becomes less and less of a burden that, life's okay. It's just that sometimes, what I always say to our men is that please do not spend 99.9% in your head. Try and spend 95% of your time in your head, and the other 5% go talk to someone. Because exactly. and that's what we're asking of ourselves. But we really need more of our men like ourselves that are sitting in this platform to show our vulnerability. Yeah, I didn't have the greatest upbringing, but I wasn't going to allow my upbringing to determine my future. Or there are things that that we've all have all been part of. It's all about trying to break that cycle. Like I'm not scared because I can say to like people, I say, when I was 8 years old, I was sexually abused by somebody. But I didn't realize that kind of format that happened way back in the past would actually determine what that looked like in the future. I was scared to even touch my children, to help these kind of fears and what we're all dealing with. But it's been able to be open and honest, because then you just don't know who you've actually spoken to in the room at the time that actually touched them and said, bro, that was like me. Because a lot of the times for a lot of our men feel as though they're alone, that they're doing it tough by themselves. They're not. We're all doing it tough. But we need to open these channels up to actually talk to each other and in the most constructive and positive way. Yes, rugby is a hard game, but hardness is not 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. And you hit it on the head there, the openness and just being open and honest. And, little things like just sending a quick message to your mate, I think we touch on it, you hear it all the time. Yeah, how are you, bro? Oh, good. But what do we do when you say, how are you, bro? Hey, actually, I'm not coping too well. And then the key then is how do we respond to that as well? And that's a big thing too, because there's not enough help out there. It's a frustrating thing, isn't it? What do we do?
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised where, like for me personally, like, what I got, what I learned during these campaigns are great. Don't get me wrong. I like the, talking about, how we go about and saying, are you okay? But the problem that you have with it is that some of the people aren't trained to know how to deal with it. And like I've had people say, are you okay? Are you okay? But in their heads, they're going, please say you're okay. Please say you're okay. Because if you say anything different, they pretty much near shit themselves, because I don't know how to deal with that. And so I'm very grateful that I've been what I've been through, because now I'm working for a firm that, like they say, what do you say? And I said, man, you just got to be honest. Like I've had people that I've just walked up to and said, dude, have you been thinking of suicide? Now, I know that rolls off my tongue pretty easily, but I've been trained to do that. And, and I'm not afraid of what the response is. And I said, dude, we need help, because if we don't get the help, then we're just going to keep on traveling down the line. But we don't realize is that if we don't get the help, then we leave an aftermath of absolute destruction, not just for the community, but the people that love you, because they're going to miss you.
Absolutely.
And you're going to just call it as it is. And that's all we're wanting is that, I put my hand up for AOK, because there's courses there to learn how to, deal with this kind of thing and first-hand suicide, because suicide comes up anywhere. And I've had it, not just personally, I've had it in my family. I've had it with my 2 kids, and just but being able to open up that dialogue and say, hey, it's okay. All right. Don't have to do this, and just really find out the best way that we can actually have these conversations. And it's safe, it's very safe.
Yeah, exactly. And surrounding ourselves by like-minded people, I think, and positive people as well, is very, very important. You hit it on the head there too. You talked about how you just loved rugby, and rugby was your outlet. You played up until the age of 48. That was your physical outlet to heal your mental side of things. How important is physical fitness? Because I'm in the health and what I call the health and wellness profession, and I'm really big on just looking after the body and watching what we eat and getting out and just getting in the fresh air and exercising and staying fit. So what's your advice, and how do you stay fit? Because I mean, at 48, not many 48-year-olds can still go out and play club footy. So what's your secret there, and how important is physical fitness to mental health?
One goes with the other.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is that, it's like, when we finished rugby, because, when we started in rugby, we started at the bottom of the ladder, and we had goals and aspirations, and we worked our way up. Well, that's no different to what we are doing now. We've got to do that. We've got to have our goals. Like my goals are, I want to be around as long as I can. So my kids, when their kids turn up, that they meet their granddad. And if that's a really easy goal, then that's reasons why we put those things in place. So, I can't iterate it anymore. Our goals don't change, or don't, they may change, but the thing is the goals that are orientated around living are vitally important, and if you can have the mental health side of it, having these discussions and having the counseling, nothing wrong with that, but also back it up with the fitness side of it. But you've got to have a goal that you work to, because then those all get incorporated together.
Exactly.
I can't ask for that anymore. And what you do with the platform that you're doing right now, Jeff, I think it's awesome. We need more of it. To actually
we're going to be growing it, and that's the plan. Is the vision is to grow this so that more and more people get to view people like yourself, leaders like yourself, mentors, And as I said right at the beginning, if there's one person that gets just one bit of gem or it saves one person's life, then mate, our job's done. That's awesome. Hey, so I want to touch on something else as well. You did a fight for life. In fact, I think you've done a couple, haven't you? How many have you done?
I did fight about 5 of them.
Oh.
I thought, after my fight for life, the one that I had against Jerry Suasawa, I mean, it was one of the most challenging because it puts you right out there. Like, I don't mind crowds. That's great. Crowds are crowds. Yeah. It's just part and parcel of rugby. But it's when you actually step into a ring. It's only you and him. And there's only two ways it's going to either we duke it out or someone's going to be leaving, on the canvas. So yeah, it was real mind games. That thing
challenging, Yeah. So this is when we talk about mental toughness. How do we describe that to people who maybe aren't sports people? Because to me, mental toughness is, I used to drive my teams when I was coaching. I used to drive them physically. So I'd say, hey, look, I'm not testing your physical fitness, because when they're bent over and they're gasping for air, I say, what am I testing? And all my players know what I'm like. They said, you're testing mental toughness. I'm not testing physical fitness. I'm driving them to those limits where they go to the edge, and they go to those deep, dark spaces. But what they're doing then is they're using this to put one foot in front of the other and carry on, because people who are mentally weak to me would be there with those ones that are like, oh, coach, you've got a little bit of a tight calf, or I'm just going to sit out this one. And I'd be like, are you really physically that inclined, or are you just mentally a bit weaker and you're going to pull out? So how do you define mental toughness and just, I guess, general day-to-day life, or even in your rugby career, etc.?
Like you said, one foot after the other, and just taking a deep breath, because at the end of the day, it's about trying to achieve, and mostly personally, I'd say, to honour what needs to be done. Because when we get confronted by these challenges, like you said, we do have a choice. We choose to either slink away, or we confront it, but no matter how long or how hard it is, or we just keep walking forward towards it. The rewards will come, and it doesn't feel like it at the time, but the rewards will come, and you just got to have enough tenacity to say to yourself, I'm gonna make it, because you do a lot of self-talk when doing this, like the challenges. And the thing is, mental toughness comes by just keep on taking those challenges on and actually taking ownership of it. When things go wrong, it's putting your hand up and say, yeah, I stuffed up, but I'm willing to just keep going, and that's what we're asking of most of our players, males and female, is that who is prepared to take ownership of it, and who is prepared to sacrifice whatever that looks like for the common goal or the goal that you're trying to achieve. I had to learn that the hard way later on in life, and life was good, but it's being able to actually remove the glasses that you had beforehand and put a new set of glasses on to say that, it's okay. This is okay. We're going to have bad times, but it's being able to get up and just keep on doing and moving forward.
Yeah. And one of my favorite sayings is, you don't always have to be motivated, but you do have to be disciplined. Yep. And you know what that's like, and I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go for a walk. Well, to me, it's just the discipline of putting your shoes on and just getting out the door. That's it. That's the hard part. Once you're outside, the fresh air takes over. And then again, it comes down to that mental, side of it. I'm only going to go for a 5-minute walk. Well, because a 5-minute walk's easy. If you say, I need you to go to the gym and you got to work out for an hour and I want your heart rate up to a set, well, that becomes too hard. So I say to people, even here in my clinic and as patients as well, you just got to be disciplined. Get your shoes on, get out the door, and go for a 5-minute walk, because that 5-minute walk always turns into something a lot more, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes, because then it's easy. That's the easy part.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'm very lucky with my family is that, we do boxing Tuesdays and Thursdays together as a team. And I think those things do help when you actually have people along with you along the ride. And I know that for myself, because you've done it for so long as a rugby player, you just like someone just to feel the same pain that you're going through. And it's nice when you do it with family, because those things are reflective in that, you do become motivated. And when you're on kind of a bit of a roll, is like you said, the discipline is to always just keep on plodding away at it. So yeah, those are the things that I look at, and what my goals and aspirations are for now that I'm over 50 is what does it look like, for my partner and for my kids, and how do we incorporate it as part of my everyday life.
Yeah. Families that train together stay together, eh?
That's right.
Good, good motto, mate. Excellent. So just back to that boxing side of it as well, because see, my son's taken up boxing, kickboxing now, and of course, me as a dad, I'm just like, you beauty. Mum's a little bit like, oh, I don't want my, and so there's that divide there, I guess, male, female, it's what have you. But what I found when I did mine, because I did a charity boxing fight about 3 years ago as well, just the discipline of it was so cool. The people are so humble. Everybody that's doing it, you might think that everybody walks in with an ego and they want to knock everybody's heads off, but I think we're all on that same path. We're all on the same journey. That there's that level of respect that is just, you don't get it anywhere else. And not just boxing, but rugby as well. It's mateship, it's that brotherhood. So I think as a society, I'd love to see every young person find a sport and challenge themselves, so physically and mentally as well. But it seems as though it's getting harder and harder to get our young kids outside and getting active. So again, is there little programs around that you're part of? I guess even with Mates in Construction, was it something that you encouraged the younger people to get out, find a gym or go and join a sport or just get out and do some exercise? Was that part of the rehab, or not necessarily rehab, but is that part of the process as well?
Oh, it's definitely part of the process. I mean, my son already had a fight nearly 4 weeks ago at kickboxing.
Awesome.
And then, I know that, there's certain elements, and especially our partners are like, oh, freaking out. But the thing is that it's so good for them to realize their limitations and realize what needs to be put into that hard work to get there. And I, just like you and like me, the elation on their faces when it's all over, the amount of work put in to get there. And that's what it takes to actually do these type of things, because, we live in that kind of masculine world where, sometimes we have to do things that mostly out of our mostly our line of sight. And by doing these type of things, it's building that character. And the more we can encourage them that they can, the character starts to develop, then we start these, then you mentally start seeing things as like, I can do this. And then I said, that's the whole point. All I have to do is show you the door. Is that it's up to you whether you walk through it. And that's absolutely. The thing is, a lot of our young guys is realizing that the instantaneous of so many doors, and so many options. But sometimes we need our parental guide to say, walk through this one. Because once you walk through this one, there'll be other doors on the other side. So it's all about making sure that, we can guide them enough so they feel as though they're building that confidence and saying, yeah, I can do this. This is what life is all about. Options.
Absolutely. 100%. So this is where I want you to put your rugby coaching hat on too, because coaching is far more than just designing a game plan and teaching passing, how to hit a ruck, etc. You hit it on the head about creating character. And then there's the things that we talk about, team culture. How do you create a team culture? Because I think if you get into those environments, I think we're going to find that people are less likely to self-harm or to have those mental health issues, etc. So as a rugby coach, how did you create a team culture and how did you build character? What were some of the key attributes that you brought to your coaching role?
I think with the coaching, was actually developing my vulnerability to the guys to know that, not everything's, the golden path, because, if you think you had a golden path, you're so wrong in that way. And it's actually showing them what that looks like. We've got to be prepared as coaches to most, we're not like the top tier where you have so many people doing their jobs. It always sits with you. You become the taxi driver, the therapist, the masseur, you become all of these things. And you've got to understand to take those on board, because every person has very different characteristics. But also sometimes for a lot of us, we can also tap into their families, who are their main role models. So it's actually going beyond than just coaching rugby. You're actually asking personal questions like, who do you look up to? What does that look like? And then you kind of take those on board, because they can be your cues to really tap into who they are. This game in itself, it's about the characters that we have and how do we connect with them. If we just did rugby and coaching and didn't think about them, then because they're not robots.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to go over and above, like you do, Jeff. Like any character that's there's something about them that sometimes you want to tap into, because you may get the best out of them, and that could possibly roll over to the other kids. Like, man, this and for some of the kids, they say, man, you know me, like I exist, and I said, that's you, because you're important to him and her and whatever that looks like. So it's really, really, really important that as a coach, you got to go over and above, but get to know your players. It doesn't take much of a 5-minute conversation to know who they are, and then incorporate that, because that's why the environments that I've been in, it took me a while to understand what they look like. If you're not ever spoken to or thing, you just feel like a spare wheel. You think, oh, what am I here for? You've got to take yourself and actually get to know who your players are, what makes them tick, because that kind of gold or information that you have is going to be vitally important to you as you start going further into the season.
Yeah, exactly. Well said, mate. Because again, you got different cultures as well. You got some of the Polynesian boys, Maori boys, the Pākehā boys, etc. You got maybe some guys who turn up to training in a suit, and others who turn up in the high vis gear, Slade. So and you got to try and then create that culture. Then, don't you? You got to build them all onto the same path and same pathway. But you touched on there too about the environments that you were in. So who are some of the better? Well, what were some of the better environments that you're in around the culture and team, and who's a mentor, one of the better coaches that you've been part of, and then why would that be? Why would you consider him to be a better coach or a better environment to be in?
I think I'll have to look at the Maori team. Be the first one, Matt Tapo. He brought it, with a military background, but really showed the importance of culture, discipline. Like a key word, discipline,
Absolutely.
Showing, in regards to our tikanga and all that kind of thing, really building up. And one of the biggest things was he knew his players by talking to them, interacting with them, seeing what he can get the best. And that's how he rolled in regards to that same kind of environment was very much the Crusaders as well. Geographically, Crusaders are pretty awesome because, you got a Christchurch. Everything's 5 minutes away from each other. You can pretty much live out of your mate's pocket, and you'd be all good to go. But there was, in itself, there's true characters. And I say the thing, people like Norm Maxwell, Norm Berryman, who are absolutely like out of this world characters, but were able to play in an environment, and because it was only through appreciation. They appreciated who they were. Like Norm, you come from Northland, now bring your style of what you do here. Let's see what happens. And it was for the positive, and that's why he loved the environment. Then you got the likes of then you take someone like Ron Cribb, who was ousted out from the Blues, went to the Crusaders, became an All Black. So all of these things, it's all about really taking the time and effort to get to know who your players are. How do we bring that all together? But in the same token is making sure that even the environment of what they're being able to, bit of give and take in regards to that disciplinary area. But and that's what we're saying is that you can't go too far forward and too far back. You always got to try and find that middle line where everybody's really coordinated with each other, wanting to be there. Because, once you build it's really hard to dissolve because, the pride that they have now, a three-peat, look at the Crusaders now. They can take on the world. But you just got to realize that you're running the fine line between your ego and the jersey that you're wearing, So that's what I've always seen with the game itself. We're running fine lines all the time. And we want to be the best character at the end of the day to provide the best kind of outlook, especially for our teams. But your attitude is going to be key to what that looks like. If I'm an arsehole, that gets rubbed onto someone else and they're going to think you're an arsehole. So, treat others the way you want to be treated. And when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, and then you all succeed, because the big picture is to all succeed, we all start going places. But if you start thinking about yourself and we don't succeed, then, our players will kind of fade away. And it could have been, and then there's that animosity of just, what if? we can't cry over spilt milk anymore after that.
Absolutely. One of the things I found too was early on in my coaching career, I picked the best players, but I found quite quickly that the best thing to do is to pick the best characters, the best people, and then you mold them into the players that you want them to be. Because the best people, the best characters are the best trainers. The best players aren't always the best people. And they may think that they're in the team and they might miss training, etc. Well, that becomes quite frustrating and it upsets that whole team environment and the culture. So it's all around character, isn't it? It's all around the person that you are. And you hit it on the head, be the best person that you can possibly be. And for us as coaches or just as people, as men, we want to encourage that. And that comes back to them being open, us being open and showing our vulnerabilities, doesn't it? Because then we get the best out of people.
Oh, 100%. And I think one of the biggest keys that I've taken out of this is that, learn their names. How easy is that? And
Absolutely,
when you learn their names, and they appreciate it, that fella actually knows me. He knows my name. Yeah. And I've learned that through, when a young kid came up to me, he goes, after having a discussion about youth guarantee, and he goes, "You know my name?" And I said, "Yeah, I know your name. What is it?" And when you repeat it back to them, they, "Oh, you were listening." So these are all key things that are really important in our development all the time, Yeah. But no, it's been a fantastic ride, Jeff. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. This is only just the beginning. There's plenty more to do.
Well, I want to finish up here now, but you'd led into the next segue, I guess, was around life after rugby. What does the next 5, 10, 15 years hold for Slade McFarland? And before I go on to that, I want to talk about that life after rugby and is there a space there for ex-sports people? And because you hit it on the head, you run out in front of 40, 50,000 people. There's that adulation. Yeah, you're with your mates all the time. You're training. You're eating well, etc. Then all of a sudden it's over. And so, is there a space there that you're aware of where ex-sports people, and I say sports people, I'm talking mainly, I guess, rugby footy players because that's where we've come from. But is there help out there for people like us that all of a sudden you feel lost? It's like, well, what do we do now? We've just had all of this, we've had a long career, 10, 15 years. What now?
In the short of things, if there is, I never saw it. We have the Rugby Players Association, which is great, but the thing is that we need them to reach out to the players, not the players reach out to them, because it's a pride thing. If I try to reach out to the Players Association, there'd be a whole lot of connotations going through my head saying, "Oh, you're once upon a time rugby player. Now you're all washed up and you're done." These are all the things that are playing in our head, and I'd rather have the Players Association. If these guys have just retired, reach out to them and say, "Hey, we are here and we're here to help." And if we need more players, like probably myself, because I put my hand up every time. Bro, if you're in trouble or whatever that looks like, and you're struggling, come and talk to me. It's okay, because the thing is, we want to shorten that pathway that you're on, because we don't want it to long. Because we've had so many players who've been builders, go to play the rugby career, and now all of a sudden go straight back to be building again, and it's too taxing on their bodies. Now they have to try and develop a new skill. So these are things that we got to realize, that our bodies aren't as resilient as it was before. But it's just being able to learn that at the end of the day, we got to learn how to take that information. How do we convert what we learned from our game and incorporate it into our community? So I'm very lucky with mates that I've been able to turn this around into a point where I can help as much as can. We've had players that were bright enough to actually do the teacher's degree while they're actually playing. Those are the disciplined ones, because they know that the reality of it. Then there's the ones that, like me, just rugby's going to be forever, and hold on.
Well, hopefully we can kickstart some group or some help out there as well, because it is we do need to be able to do that. So my final question to you, Slade, what's the next 5, 10, 15 years hold for Slade McFarland? What's your goals? What's your plans? And what do you hope to achieve?
I think the thing is that, being married is one of those goals, and now I'm part of that fraternity. But my goal is to create the best memories for myself and my partner, because the day that I have my last breath on this earth, that I can look at it and say, I've done okay. To watch my children grow up, and graduate from university, and my daughter dancing, and now is really to actually look at things and say, hey, there's some bloody awesome people out there, and stop sitting on your ass and get out there and see them and make them realize, because at the end of the day, time is all we have. Time is precious. Time is one of the most expensive commodities that we have at this time, and we just got to spend it the best way possible. So that's how I look at life at the moment, and I just want to enjoy it as much as possible, and enjoy these kind of these opportunities to talk in front of our people, and make them realize that you're worth it. You're worth every penny, every time of the day, to be on top of the ground. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely, that's great advice, mate. Really appreciate it. Hey, look, Slade, thanks so much, man. I can't express my gratitude enough for you for spending an hour of your time and having a chat to our audience. And you can be so proud of your rugby career. I know that I've got the utmost respect for you. And again, what you achieved on the field, just absolutely amazing. But I think you need to be probably as proud, if not more proud, from what you've achieved off it, especially since your playing days. Just being so open and honest here, I think, is just been a real eye-opener. And I'm sure that people listening will just get so much information out of you. And I really, really appreciate you being so open and honest, mate.
I love being on your show. If you ever need me back again, because I actually not just working performing with mates, I'm also working with the farming community. I work with Lean on a Gate, Talk to a Mate, because we know suicide is a big problem with our farming community. So I'm working hard in that space, because I want to try and help out our farming community, because there's not much out there. So we're just trying to work every avenue we can to try and support our farmers.
That's awesome, mate. Slade, thanks very much, mate. Our time is up. And